Sometimes a car, no, a sports car, is just too good to be true. It may have a fantastic engine and great looks, but when it comes down to it, just better left alone. These are the 6 cars that we're covering today that are not ideal. Used sports cars that you should run away from. Starting with, the RX-8, the car that Mazda fans pretend never existed. After killing off the legendary RX-7, probably the car with the best design language that ever came out of Japan, Mazda thought that they could keep the rotary dream alive with this thing. And sure, on paper it sounds great. Rear-wheel drive, a high-revving rotary engine, and a design that actually looked pretty futuristic. But in reality, the RX-8 is a rolling reliability nightmare that even die-hard rotary fans struggle to defend. Let's start with the main attraction, or should I say, the main problem. The Renesis rotary engine, which Mazda hyped this thing up like it was the second coming of the 13B from the RX-7, but it was honestly anything but. Ever try starting your RX-8 after a short drive, only to find it cranks and cranks but refuses to fire up? Yeah, that's engine flooding, one of the RX-8's signature quirks. If you don't let the engine warm up properly before shutting it off, it might just refuse to start again. Hope you like pushing your car, and let's talk about those apex seals, aka the reason RX-8 engines don't last. These tiny metal strips are crucial to keeping the engine running, but they wear out like cheap brake pads, leading to compression loss, misfires, and eventually a full-blown engine failure. And the best part, a proper rebuild costs $5,000 or more. More like $10,000 the last I checked. Mazda designed the RX-8's rotary engine to burn oil by design. Yeah, you heard that right. This thing literally eats oil for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you don't check it and top it off regularly, say goodbye to your engine. Most owners become walking dipsticks because they have to check their oil every single gas fill up. But hey, at least it's got cool suicide doors that make no sense in a sports car, although they were the last suicide doors in any production car ever. So let's be real. Who was Mazda even marketing this car to? A 4-seater with half doors? Either commit to being a hardcore sports car or be a practical coupe. You can't have both. So, unless you enjoy rebuilding engines every 60,000 miles and constantly explaining to people why your sports cars won't start, well, do yourself a favor. Stay far, far away from the RX-8. Ooh, a stylish German-engineered sports car with all-wheel drive, turbo power, and a low price tag? What's not to love? Well, how about the fact that this thing was basically a death trap when it first came out? Yes, the first-gen Audi TT looked amazing when it hit the market back in 1998, but what buyers didn't know was that this car had a serious stability problem. A problem so bad that it literally killed people. Here's the deal. Audi engineers thought it would be a great idea to make this TT ultra light, and their early models had no rear spoiler and a suspension setup that made the car prone to snap oversteer. Yes, meaning if you do so much as lift off the throttle mid-corner, the car would whip around and send you ass first into whatever immovable object was waiting for you on the side of the road. This led to a bunch of accidents, some of them fatal, until Audi admitted that they screwed up and issued a recall. They slapped a bigger rear spoiler on it and tweaked the suspension, but even with those fixes, this TT still wasn't the safest thing on 4 wheels. All right, let's say you're crazy enough to look past the handling issues. Maybe you think, I'll just drive carefully. Well, buckle up, because the maintenance bills on these things are gonna make you wish that you had bought literally anything else. Both the 1.8 liter turbo and the VR6 suffer from premature timing chain failures. If you don't catch it in time, well, congrats, your engine is completely toast. Like most early 2000 Audis, the TT is loaded with electrical gremlins. Expect random warning lights, flickering dashboards, and a climate control system that does whatever it wants, because why should you be the one in control? If you get the Quattro version, think all-wheel drive will make it safer? Yeah, good luck with that. The Haldex system is notorious for failures, and replacing it is gonna cost you thousands. And at that point, you might as well have just bought a Subaru and saved yourself the headache. So let me do some quick math. Got a dangerous handling flaw, expensive maintenance, and constant electrical issues all wrapped up in a car that's now 20 plus years old? If you ask me, that's a recipe for nope. By the way, if you want to find any ideal cars that aren't on this list and get the best deal possible, use the pinned first comment linked to Auto Tempest. Go check it out, see how cheap you can get something crazy. Next, wow, a sleek 2-door roadster that looks like a baby Corvette and won't break the bank. I mean, what's the catch? Oh, don't worry. You'll find out the second you actually try to live with one. The Pontiac Solstice was GM's answer to the Mazda Miata, and on the surface, it seemed like a worthy competitor, but here's the problem. The base model wasn't actually fast. Despite having a 2.4 liter Ecotec 4-cylinder, it took a whopping 7.2 seconds to hit 60 miles per hour. For reference, that's slower than a Toyota Camry from the same era. The GXP model did bring a turbocharged 2-liter engine, but guess what? Turbo problems and fuel system failures were common. So either way, you're losing. Now, you know how all those GM cars from the early 2000s had that distinct cheap feeling? Yeah, the Solstice is no exception. The interior is full of cheap plastics, rattling noises, and switch gears that feels like it was designed as an afterthought. And let's not forget the convertible top. You want to put the roof down? Have fun doing a 5-step process manually, because GM apparently thought power folding roofs were too fancy for sports cars. You can put a Miata top down in like 2 seconds while going 35 miles per hour, so I don't know why or where or what they were thinking. But the real reason you should avoid this car, the ignition switch defect. GM had to recall over 1.4 million vehicles, including the Solstice, because a faulty ignition switch could randomly turn off the engine while driving. Oh, and when that happened, it also disabled the airbags. Yeah, great safety feature, right? This defect was actually linked to 13 deaths, and if your Solstice hasn't had the recall fix, you're basically gambling with your life every single day you start the car. So, unless you want a sports car that's slower than a family sedan, has flaws in the safety department, and is built like a Fisher-Price toy, the Solstice is one roadster you should steer clear of. Okay, picture this. You're scrolling online and you see a used Mercedes SL600 for under 15,000 bucks, a luxury Grand Tourer with a V12 engine, a drop top, and German engineering. What an absolute steal. Steal my heart. And then you realize why it is so cheap. Mercedes stuffed a massive 6-liter V12 under the hood of this thing, cranking out 389 horses. Sounds awesome, right? Except keeping this engine running is an absolute nightmare. You thought an oil change on your Civic was expensive? Try 850 bucks on an SL600. Need to fix a fuel injector? That's like $1,000 each. And then this car has 12 of them. And when, not if, your engine develops leaks, be prepared to remove half the engine just to fix basic issues. Oh, but it only gets worse. The SL600 was ahead of its time with advanced electronics and hydraulic suspension, which means everything will break. The adaptive dampening system is a nightmare to repair, and if it fails, it's gonna cost you more than what you paid for the car. And let's not forget about the famous biodegradable wiring harness. Yeah, you heard that right. Mercedes thought it was a great idea to use wires that literally disintegrated over time. Look, the SL600, it's beautiful. It's stolen my heart before. It drives like a dream, but unless you have an unlimited repair budget and a personal Mercedes mechanic, this thing is a financial black hole. Avoid it unless you want to live in a repair shop. The Pontiac Fiero, I mean, the car that had so much potential, but instead became one of the most infamous death traps in GM history. The Fiero was fiery, and it was GM's first mid-engine sports car. And at a glance, it was a bold idea. But here is the problem. Early models had a habit of catching on fire. Thanks to oil leaks, overheating issues, and weak connecting rods, the 1984 model year alone had over 135 reported engine fires. GM tried to fix it in later years, but the damage had already been done. People started calling it the Fiero. Yes, even if you can ignore the fire risk, the Fiero wasn't exactly fast. I mean, the base model had a 2.5 liter Iron Duke engine, making a pathetic 92 horsepower. That's right, a car that looks like it's this sporty and that slow, slower than a minivan? Come on. Really? Even the later V6 models were underwhelming, and handling wasn't great either. Thanks to GM using Chevy Citation suspension parts to keep costs low. Yeah, real performance engineering right there. On top of that, these cars were cheaply built, meaning finding one in decent condition today is a serious challenge. The interior falls apart, electrical issues are common, and replacement parts are getting harder to find. If you want a real mid-engine sports car, save your money and buy an MR2 instead. Unless, of course, you like car's extra crispy. 500 horsepower, a V10 that revs to 8,250 RPM, a legendary BMW badge, and a prick on the inside, not the outside, like a porcupine. The E60 M5 sounds like the ultimate sports sedan, until you actually own one. Because while this thing is insanely fun to drive, it's insanely good at draining your bank account as well. Let's start with the S85 V10 engine, one of the coolest, most high revving power plants BMW has ever made. But here's the problem. The rod bearings are absolute garbage. If you don't replace them every 60,000 miles, you're basically rolling the dice on an engine failure that will cost you $15,000 or more to rebuild. And no, that's not if, that is when. Let's talk about the worst part of the E60 M5, the SMG transmission. This is a robotized single clutch manual, the very same type of transmission that essentially destroyed a full generation of supercars and sports cars in the early 2000s. Why? Because it's a bad design that fried clutches like no tomorrow. The SMG pump alone costs over $4,000 to replace, and when it fails, you're gonna be stranded, calling a tow truck and looking like every other BMW driver out there. But BMW fans like myself love to say, just swap it to a manual. Let's be real, that's like a $10,000 conversion. Everything else breaks too. The iDrive system is buggy at best. Sensors constantly fail, and the car is loaded with random electrical gremlins. Throttle actuators, another massive failure point. These go bad every 50,000 miles or so, and replacing them costs about $2,500. Look, when the E60 M5 is working and it comes in a manual transmission, it's one of the best sedans ever made. But unless you have stupid amounts of money to keep it running, it's gonna leave you broke, frustrated, and wondering why you didn't just buy an M3 instead. So there you have it, sports cars that you should never buy. Sure, they might look cool and tempt you with their prices, but trust me, the repair bills, safety issues, and endless headaches are not worth it unless you don't have a brain. Then go buy one of these things. And use that link via AutoTempest in the pinned first comment. If you enjoyed this vid, like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell. Check out these Ideal vids over here. I'm Brad, this is Ideal. Catch you next week and promise me one thing, keep living the Ideal lifestyle.